For 9 years, she touched her ear. Every specialist said the same thing. Nothing can be done. Her father spent millions. Her mother stopped trying. Then one evening, the maid saw something during a dinner party that made her blood run cold. What she pulled from that little girl's ear didn't just restore her hearing. It destroyed a marriage, exposed a conspiracy, and revealed the darkest secret a mother could keep. Before we go any further, I need you to do something. Hit that subscribe button, drop a like on this video, and tell me in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? Because I believe this story found you today for a reason, and by the end, you'll understand why. The Whitlock estate sat on 12 manicured acres in Greenwich, Connecticut. White Georgian columns, circular driveway with a fountain that never stopped running, hedges trimmed into perfect geometric shapes. The kind of house you see in magazines, the kind that makes people slow their cars just to stare through the iron gates. From the outside, it looked like the American dream. But inside, silence had become a weapon. Not the peaceful kind of silence. Not the kind that feels like rest after a long day. This was the heavy kind, the suffocating kind. The kind that sits on your chest when you're trying to sleep and whispers that something is very, very wrong. Servants moved through those marble hallways like ghosts. Soft footsteps, careful movements. They'd learned quickly. Mr. Whitlock didn't like disruptions. Mrs. Whitlock didn't like imperfection. And the little girl? The beautiful little girl with blonde curls and green eyes who couldn't hear a single sound? She didn't like anything anymore. She'd stopped expecting things to change. Harrison Whitlock had built an empire in commercial real estate. Self-made. Ruthless. The kind of man who turned millions into billions through sheer force of will and 70-hour work weeks. He could negotiate billion-dollar deals in his sleep. He could read a property's potential from a single walkthrough. He could make grown men nervous with just a look. But he couldn't fix his daughter's ears. Alice was born 9 years ago on a Tuesday morning in March. 10 fingers, 10 toes, perfect in every way except one. Profoundly deaf. Congenital, the doctors said. Irreversible, they said. Accept it, they said. Harrison didn't accept it. He flew Alice to Johns Hopkins, to the Mayo Clinic, to specialists in Zurich who'd worked with the royal families of Europe, to researchers in Tokyo who were pioneering experimental treatments. He wrote checks that would make most people dizzy. Checks with so many zeros they looked like phone numbers. Nothing worked. And with every failed treatment, every doctor who shook his head and said, "I'm sorry. There's nothing more we can do," something else broke. Not just Harrison's hope. His marriage. Catherine Whitlock had been beautiful once. Not just physically, though she was that too, with her perfectly highlighted hair and her yoga-toned body and her diamond earrings that caught the light just right. No, she'd been beautiful in the way she laughed. In the way she looked at Alice during those first few months, when they still thought the deafness might be temporary, when they still had hope. But hope is a dangerous thing to lose. It doesn't just disappear. Curdles. It turns into something bitter and resentful and ugly. Catherine stopped going to Alice's appointments 3 years ago. Stopped learning new signs. Stopped trying. She filled her days with yoga classes and lunch dates and wine that came in bottles too expensive to show the price tag. And at night, in the master bedroom that might as well have been on a different planet from Alice's room, she lay awake and dreamed of a different life. A life where her daughter was normal, where people didn't stare, where she didn't have to say she's deaf and watch pity flood their faces. The Whitlock house was full of expensive things and empty of joy. Alice spent her days in the sunroom with her puzzles and her dolls and the silence that had become her entire world. She'd stopped hoping too. 9 years old, and she'd already learned that hope was for other people. People whose mothers looked at them like they mattered. People whose fathers didn't spend every evening in their study staring at medical bills and research papers like they were battle strategies. But what none of them knew, not Harrison with his millions, not Catherine with her cold distance, not even Alice with her careful acceptance of a world without sound, was that everything was about to change. Because on a gray November morning, a woman was about to walk through their front door. A woman who'd lost her own sister to a treatable disease because they couldn't afford care. A woman who'd made a vow to God that she'd never stand by while a child suffered, no matter the cost. A woman with observant eyes, gentle hands, and a heart that refused to accept what everyone else called impossible. Her name was Janet Baptiste. She was hired to clean floors, but she was about to save a life, destroy a marriage, and expose a truth so dark it would haunt everyone who heard it. This is her story. This is Alice's story. And this is the story of the day Harrison Whitlock walked into a room and saw something he didn't expect. Something that would change everything he thought he knew about love, sacrifice, and who really deserves to be called family. Let's begin. Harrison Whitlock sat in his study on the second floor, surrounded by leather-bound books he'd never read and art he'd bought because someone told him it was valuable. The mahogany desk before him was covered in medical bills. Invoices from Johns Hopkins, $47,000 for a consultation that lasted 2 hours. A receipt from the Mayo Clinic, $89,000 for tests that revealed nothing new. A statement from Dr. Werner in Zurich, €120 for a treatment protocol that Catherine had called torture, and Alice had endured with silent, tearful resignation. He picked up the silver frame beside his computer. Alice at 6 months old, before they knew. Before the pediatrician had clapped his hands behind her head and watched her not flinch. Before the word profound had entered their vocabulary in the cruelest possible context. In the photo, she was laughing. He couldn't remember the last time he'd seen her laugh. The Connecticut autumn light filtered through the window, casting long shadows across the Persian rug that cost more than most people's cars. Somewhere in this house, his daughter was playing alone. Somewhere in this house, his wife was pretending everything was fine. Outside in the garden, Catherine sat on the stone bench beneath the oak tree, a glass of Chardonnay balanced on her knee. It was 3 in the afternoon. The bottle on the patio table was half empty. She stared at the koi pond, watching the fish move in their endless, pointless circles. Her phone buzzed, another invitation to a charity gala. She'd been avoiding those lately. Too many questions about Alice. Too much pity disguised as concern. "How is she doing?" they'd ask, heads tilted, voices dripping with sympathy. What they really meant was, "Aren't you tired of having a broken child?" She was. God help her, she was exhausted. In the playroom on the 3rd floor, Alice arranged her dolls in a perfect row, each one sitting at precisely the same angle. She'd given up trying to make them talk to each other. What was the point? They never answered anyway. She touched her right ear, a habit now unconscious as breathing, and felt the familiar ache deep inside. It had been there for months, maybe years. She couldn't remember a time without it. The Whitlock house was full of expensive things and empty of love. Silence wasn't just Alice's condition, it was the family disease. Janet Baptiste arrived at the Whitlock estate on a gray November morning, her single suitcase held tight in both hands. The iron gates opened automatically, swallowing her into a world she didn't belong to. She'd left Port-au-Prince 6 years ago with a teaching certificate and empty pockets. Now she cleaned houses for people who had more bathrooms than she had years of education. Her mother's voice still echoed from their last phone call. Janet, the medicine. It's $400 this week. For $100 her mother didn't have. For $100 that stood between life and slow, painful death. So Janet had taken this job, swallowed her pride, and walked through these gates. Catherine Whitlock met her in the foyer, assessing her the way you'd assess furniture. "You'll work 6 days a week. Discretion is essential in this household. We value our privacy. Boundaries are not suggestions here, they're requirements. Do you understand?" "Yes, ma'am. Alice, our daughter, has special needs. You're not to engage with her beyond basic courtesy. We have professionals for that. Special needs. That's what they called it. As if deafness was something shameful that required professional handling. Mrs. Chun, the head housekeeper, showed Janet to her quarters. A small room off the kitchen, clean but impersonal. "Mr. Whitlock is obsessed with fixing Alice," Mrs. Chun said quietly. "Mrs. Whitlock is obsessed with pretending nothing's wrong. You're here to clean. That's all. Don't forget it." But Janet had already seen the little girl. Alice sat in the morning room, arranging toy teacups in a perfect line. Blonde curls catching the light. green eyes focused with the intensity of someone much older. And then she did it. Touched her right ear, just briefly, and her face tightened. A wince so small you'd miss it if you weren't paying attention. Janet's breath caught. She'd seen that look before. On her sister Mireille's face, the week before she died. 12 years old, complaining of ear pain, and their mother saying, "We'll go to the clinic when we have money." By the time they had money, Mireille was gone. A simple infection. Treatable. Fatal only because no one had paid attention soon enough. That night, Janet knelt beside her narrow bed, rosary in hand. "Lord, why did you bring me to this house?" The silence offered no answer. But deep in her chest, something whispered, "Pay attention." The days developed a rhythm. Harrison left at 6 in the morning, his BMW disappearing down the driveway before the sun fully rose. He returned after 9 at night, went straight to his study, closed the door. Catherine scheduled her life in careful blocks. Yoga at 10, lunch with the Greenwich wives at noon, salon appointments at 3, wine on the terrace at 5. Anything to be anywhere but home. Alice had tutors, a parade of professionals who came and went like shift workers. Speech therapy Mondays and Thursdays. Physical therapy Tuesdays. ASL instruction Wednesdays. They were kind enough, efficient enough, but the moment their sessions ended, they packed their bags and left. No one stayed. No one played. No friends ever visited. Janet watched this lonely girl arrange her toys in perfect silence and felt something crack inside her chest. She started small. A smooth stone from the garden, left on Alice's windowsill. A folded paper bird beside her breakfast plate. Alice's eyes would light up when she found them, and she'd look around, searching for the giver. One morning, Alice left something in return. A crayon drawing of a yellow bird. Janet pressed it to her heart. That evening, Janet walked to the public library and checked out 3 books on American Sign Language. She sat in her small room practicing the alphabet, the basic words, her fingers clumsy and unsure. Hello, friend. Happy. Safe. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday afternoon. Alice was in the sunroom, and Janet was dusting nearby. Their eyes met. Janet signed slowly, "Hello." Alice's mouth dropped open. Then her hands flew. "You're nice." "Why?" Janet's response was halting, uncertain, but sincere. "Because you deserve kindness." Alice's whole face transformed. She rushed over and began teaching Janet her personal signs. The ones her tutors didn't know. The ones her parents had never bothered to learn. Chest tap twice, happy. Hands over heart, safe. Finger to temple, then touching her chest. Thinking about Mama. That child was starving. Not for food, but for someone to see her as whole. They were practicing colors when Catherine appeared in the doorway, wine glass in hand. Her eyes turned to ice. Alice has certified ASL tutors. She doesn't need improvisation. Janet stood. "Mrs. Whitlock, I was just..." "Your job is to clean, Janet. Alice has enough people examining her." Catherine's smile was sharp as broken glass. "I trust we understand each other?" "Yes, ma'am." But as Catherine walked away, Alice grabbed Janet's hand and made the sign. Hands over heart. Safe. 3 weeks in, and Alice sought Janet out now. Followed her from room to room. Sat beside her while she folded laundry. But on this particular Thursday, something was wrong. Alice kept touching her ear. Tears pooling in those green eyes. Silent pain etched across her small face. They were alone in the sunroom. Janet knelt down, signed carefully. "Can I look?" "I'll be gentle." Alice hesitated, then nodded. Janet tilted the child's head toward the afternoon light streaming through the windows. She looked closer than she'd ever dared before. And there it was, deep in the ear canal, dark and glistening. A compacted mass, larger than she'd expected, possibly infected. The same thing her cousin Pierre had in Haiti when he was 7. They'd taken him to the clinic, and the doctor removed it in minutes. Pierre heard his mother's voice for the first time and cried for an hour. Janet's hands trembled. How did every specialist miss this? She found Mrs. Chun in the kitchen. "I need to tell you something about Alice." Mrs. Chun didn't even look up from the vegetables she was chopping. Those doctors looked at her with million-dollar equipment. You think you saw something they didn't. But I did see. You saw what you wanted to see. Don't make trouble, Janet. She had to tell Harrison. She waited outside his study that evening, rehearsing the words. But Catherine appeared like a ghost, blocking the door. Looking for someone? I need to speak with Mr. Whitlock about Alice. Catherine's face hardened. I've seen your type before, playing savior to feel important. Alice is not your project. She stepped closer, voice dropping to a whisper. Step out of line once more, and I'll have you on a plane back to Port-au-Prince. Do you understand? Your mother's medication, what does it cost? $400 a week? How long will she last without it? Janet's blood turned to ice. That night, she knelt beside her bed, Bible open to Exodus. Moses asking God, "Who am I to go before Pharaoh?" And God's answer, "I will be with you." She closed the book, tears streaming down her face. She knew what she'd seen, and she knew what ignoring it would cost. Some debts you pay with money, some you pay with your soul. Outside her window, the Connecticut night pressed dark and cold against the glass. Inside her chest, a war was beginning. Between survival and sacrifice, between fear and faith, between the woman she'd always been and the woman God was calling her to become. Janet was polishing the hallway mirror outside the master bedroom when the voices started. She should have left, should have made herself scarce like Mrs. Chun taught her. But something in Harrison's tone, desperation mixed with anger, rooted her to the spot. The new audiologist says we should try the cochlear implant study at Columbia. They're having remarkable results. No more studies, Harrison. Catherine's voice was flat, dead. She's 9. She is what she is. What she is. She's our daughter. She's the reason our life stopped. Catherine's volume rose. When was the last time we went to anything together? A dinner party? A vacation? When did we last have a conversation that wasn't about doctors and therapies and specialists? You're her mother. I'm exhausted. I've been exhausted for 9 years. Something shattered, glass against a wall. Maybe it's time to consider Meadowbrook. Silence. Then Harrison's voice, barely controlled. The boarding school? She's 9, Catherine. A specialized boarding school. She'd get better care, trained staff, other children like her. We'd get our lives back and maybe... Catherine's voice dropped to something almost pleading. Maybe we could try again. For a child who doesn't require our entire existence. The silence that followed was suffocating. I don't even know who you are anymore. Harrison's voice was breaking, fracturing into pieces. The woman I married loved children, wanted a family. Now you're talking about our daughter like she's a burden we need to dispose of. The feeling is mutual. Catherine's words were ice. The man I married had time for me. Now all you do is obsess over something that can't be fixed. The door slammed. Footsteps, Harrison's, pounded down the stairs. Janet pressed her back against the wall, heart hammering against her ribs. Her hands were shaking. Catherine wanted to send Alice away. Not to help her. To erase her. To pretend she'd never existed so they could try again. For a child who met her standards of acceptable. Lord, this woman gave birth to that child and sees her as a burden. While I, a stranger, would give anything to help her. Some women birth children. Some women mother them. Catherine Whitlock had done only the first. Janet looked down at her hands. These hands that scrubbed floors and folded sheets. These hands that had nothing, no credentials, no authority, no power. But they had something Catherine's hands didn't. They had love. And sometimes that was enough. 2 weeks later, Harrison announced a dinner party. Potential investors from Manhattan. Catherine seized control immediately. Alice will attend. She needs to be part of this family. It looks strange that we hide her. Janet was assigned to serve. She watched Catherine that afternoon, micromanaging the florist, the caterer, downing wine between phone calls. By 5 o'clock, Catherine had gone through half a bottle. Alice was dressed like a doll. Expensive blue floral dress, hair styled in perfect curls with a white bow. She looked beautiful. She also looked terrified. Janet caught her in the hallway, saw her touching her ear, face pale as paper. "Sir." Janet found Harrison adjusting his tie. "Alice seems unwell." "Maybe she shouldn't." Catherine appeared behind her. "She's fine. She's always fine." "Stop hovering, Janet. You're the help, not the pediatrician." The guests arrived at 7. 12 people in designer clothes, carrying wine that cost more than Janet sent home in a month. They gathered in the dining room, crystal glasses, china plates, candlelight reflecting off polished silver. Janet served the first course, eyes never leaving Alice. The girl sat rigid between her parents, picking at her food, pressing her napkin to her ear when she thought no one was watching. Mid-main course it happened. Alice went rigid, completely still. Then her hand flew to her ear, and her face contorted into an expression of pure agony. She tried to stand, stumbled, and fell from her chair. The convulsing started immediately. Chaos erupted. Guests screaming, chairs scraping back. Catherine frozen, wine glass still in hand, mouth open in silent horror. Harrison lunging forward, shouting, "Call 911. Someone call 911. Janet didn't think. She dropped the serving tray, china shattering across the floor, and ran. She shoved past Catherine, fell to her knees beside Alice. The girl was curled in a ball, both hands clutching her ear, silent tears streaming down her face. "This is septic. This will kill her. This is the moment." Janet pulled Alice into her lap, cradling her head. "Baby, I need to look. I need to help you. Do you trust me?" Alice's eyes found hers through the pain. She nodded. Janet looked up at Harrison. "Sir, I need your lighter and a bobby pin. Now." Harrison stared at her, bewildered. "What? Now?" In that moment, she wasn't a maid. She wasn't an immigrant. She wasn't powerless. She was the only person in that room who loved that child enough to act. Harrison's hands shook as he pulled the lighter from his pocket. Harrison's hands shook as he pressed the lighter and bobby pin into Janet's palm. She held the pin in the flame, watching it glow. The guests had gone silent, watching with horrified fascination. "What are you doing?" Catherine's voice cracked. "Stop. You'll hurt her." Janet didn't respond. She positioned Alice's head in the candlelight, tilted it just right. Her lips moved in silent prayer. "Guide my hands, Jesus." She inserted the sterilized pin gently, carefully, into Alice's ear canal. Found the mass. Hooked it. Resistance. She pulled, slow and steady. Alice whimpered, an actual sound, audible, real. Janet pulled again. The mass released. Dark, wet, years of compacted wax and debris landed in her palm. The smell was terrible. But before Janet could react, Alice gasped. A real, deep, shuddering gasp that filled the silent room. Her hand flew to her ear. Her eyes went wide, wider than humanly possible. She sat up suddenly, looking around the dining room like she'd never seen it before. People's mouths were moving, and she could hear them. Silverware clinking against china. A woman crying. A man whispering, "Oh my God!" The grandfather clock in the hallway. The sound of her own breathing. Alice's mouth opened. I can. What is?" First words ever spoken. Rough, unpracticed, beautiful. The room went completely silent. Harrison appeared in the doorway, phone still in his hand from calling 911. He froze, mouth open, hand raised halfway, unable to process what he was seeing, what he was hearing. Alice turned toward him. "Daddy," she said, "Daddy." Harrison's legs buckled. He fell to his knees, and a sound came from deep in his chest. Half sob, half prayer. "Alice." She heard her name, in her father's voice, for the first time in her entire life. Alice ran to him on unsteady legs. Harrison caught her, pulled her close, buried his face in her hair. "You sound like..." Alice's voice trembled. "I always imagined you would sound." Harrison sobbed, actually sobbed. his body shaking with 9 years of grief and guilt and desperate hope finally answered. The paramedics burst through the door. Catherine stood frozen near the wall, face white as death, trembling. The guests stood like statues, several crying openly. And Janet knelt on the floor, the dark mass still in her palm, tears streaming down her face. 9 years of silence shattered in a single moment. The deaf could hear. The lost was found. And everyone in that room knew they'd witnessed something holy. At Greenwich Hospital, Alice sat on the examination table while Dr. Chun, the pediatric ENT specialist, ran tests. Her hearing was fully restored. The infection was minor, already responding to antibiotics. Alice couldn't stop talking. Hello. Light. Daddy. More. Music. Each word was a gift she unwrapped with wonder. She could hear the monitors beeping, nurses talking in the hallway, her own voice vibrating in her throat. Dr. Chun reviewed Alice's medical file on his computer. His face darkened. He stood abruptly. Mr. Whitlock, I need to show you something disturbing. In his private office, Dr. Chun pulled up digital scans from 18 months prior. There, he pointed. Clear evidence of obstruction in the right ear canal. The notation below read, significant impaction noted. Recommend immediate otoscopy for removal. High likelihood of hearing restoration. Follow-up box. Checked. Yes. But the follow-up date was blank. Another note, dated 3 weeks later. Per parent request. Pursuing alternative treatment protocol. Postponing otoscopy. Harrison's blood drained from his face. Parent request? I never. Dr. Chun zoomed in on the signature. Catherine Whitlock. Harrison's hands began to shake. She knew? She knew Alice could be helped. According to these notes, she consulted Dr. Morrison separately. He advised immediate removal. She declined authorization. Dr. Chen's voice was carefully neutral, but his disgust was evident. Harrison stormed into the hallway, found Catherine in the waiting area. Catherine, private room. Now. Inside the consultation room, he turned on her. You knew. 18 months ago, you knew. Catherine's face went defensive, her body shaking. They said it might not work. They said high likelihood. Harrison's voice cracked. The note says high likelihood of hearing restoration. Catherine broke. You don't understand what it's been like, Harrison. The stares, the pity, the endless appointments. So you let our daughter suffer? I couldn't do it anymore. I wanted our life back. Tears streamed down her face. I thought if we just sent her to Meadowbrook, we could start over. Start over? With what? A replacement child. A normal child, yes, Catherine screamed. Is that so wrong? To want one normal thing in my life. Harrison's voice turned to ice. Get out. Harrison. Get out of this hospital. Get out of my house. Get away from my daughter. Catherine realized, too late, what she'd confessed. I didn't mean. Every word you meant. I just finally heard it. Meanwhile, Janet sat in the waiting area, rosary in hand. A security guard approached. Ma'am, Mrs. Whitlock has requested we detain you. Janet's heart stopped. On what grounds? Practicing medicine without a license. Assault on a minor. Dr. Chun intervened immediately. I'm the attending physician. This woman saved that child's life. I will testify to that in any court. But Catherine, in her rage, made another call. Immigration enforcement. Janet's work visa had a minor documentation error. Something technical, something fixable, but enough. ICE agents arrived within the hour. Alice saw Janet in handcuffs and screamed. Actually screamed with her new voice. No. She helped me. Don't take her. Harrison stood helpless. I'll fix this, Janet, I promise. Janet met his eyes with calm dignity. Take care of your daughter, Mr. Whitlock. That's all that matters. They led her away. The same hands that saved a child were now in handcuffs. The same mother who birthed her had let her suffer. And the same money that couldn't cure deafness now tried to deport the woman who did. 3 months later, Janet stood in federal immigration court. Harrison beside her in an expensive suit, Manhattan's best immigration attorney at the table. Dr. Chun testified. Character witnesses lined up. Alice's medical records were entered as evidence. Harrison took the stand. This woman saved my daughter's life. She exposed negligence that my money enabled. She did what I should have done, paid attention. His voice broke. If this country deports her, we don't deserve the hope she represents. The judge reviewed the paperwork. The visa error was minor, clerical. Given Ms. Baptiste's contributions and character, I'm adjusting her status to permanent residency. Pathway to citizenship is open. Janet wept into her hands. Outside the courthouse, Harrison made his offer. Not as a maid, as Alice's companion and ASL tutor. Salary enough to bring your mother here for medical care. The guest house is yours. Mr. Whitlock, I don't want charity. This isn't charity. This is Alice choosing her family. And you're it. The divorce was brutal and quick. Catherine's lawyer tried to argue for custody until Harrison played the recorded hospital confession. She was offered a choice. Walk away with supervised visitation or face criminal charges for child endangerment. She signed. Moved to Manhattan. Her country club friends knew the truth. She ate lunch alone now. Harrison sold the Greenwich estate. Too many ghosts. The new house in Stamford was smaller, warmer. Alice's room had music boxes, a radio always playing. She still used ASL not because she needed to, but because she wanted to. It was part of who she was now. Janet's mother, Marie, sat on the porch in her rocking chair, teaching Alice to braid hair in Creole. Alice was learning 3 languages now. Harrison established the Janet Baptiste Foundation for Pediatric Hearing Health. Mobile clinics in immigrant neighborhoods. Free screenings regardless of documentation status. Training for doctors to actually look. At the ribbon cutting, Alice spoke in her halting but clear voice. My name is Alice. I was deaf. Someone noticed when nobody else did. This foundation is for all the kids still waiting for someone to notice them. Standing ovation. Alice's 10th birthday was small. Just family, the real kind. Janet, Marie, Dr. Chun, Mrs. Chun, 3 school friends. Fairy lights in the garden. Haitian griot with plantains. Marie's recipe. After the candles, Alice said, Daddy, can you hear the birds? Yes, sweetheart. I hear them every morning, and I never take it for granted. Harrison knelt, signed as he spoke. I love you, Alice. I love you too, Daddy. And I love Janet. She's family now, right? Forever family. Alice turned to Janet. Teach me the sign for miracle. Janet showed her, hands opening like a flower blooming. Alice practiced, then looked at Janet. That's you. You're my miracle. Janet's eyes filled with tears. No, baby. You're mine. They'd lost a mansion but gained a home. Lost a mother but found a family. And in the space where silence used to live, there was music. Before you leave, here's something every parent needs to know, and something the medical industry doesn't advertise. Cerumen impaction, compacted earwax, is one of the most underdiagnosed causes of hearing loss in children. The American Academy of Audiology estimates that up to 6% of the general population suffers from it, and in children it is frequently mistaken for congenital deafness. Symptoms include persistent ear touching, unexplained irritability, pain with no visible cause, and delayed speech development. It is entirely treatable, often in a single appointment. Yet children go years, sometimes their entire childhoods, living in silence because no one looked closely enough. And here is where the story gets darker. Medical negligence accounts for over 250,000 deaths annually in the United States alone, making it the 3rd leading cause of death according to a Johns Hopkins study. More troubling, research shows that wealth and access to top specialists does not protect you from misdiagnosis. In some cases, ongoing treatment protocols create financial incentives to manage conditions rather than cure them, to keep patients coming back, to keep the checks arriving. If your child frequently touches their ear, winces at pressure, shows signs of hearing difficulty, or has received a diagnosis of irreversible, do not accept the first answer. Request a full audiological evaluation including otoscopy. Request copies of every scan, every test, every recommendation ever made. Ask directly, is there anything in this file that was noted but never acted upon? That single question has changed lives. Harrison Whitlock had unlimited resources and still missed what a maid noticed in 3 weeks, because she paid attention. You don't need millions to advocate for your child. You need to look. You need to ask. You need to refuse to be silenced by credentials and authority when your instincts tell you something is wrong. Sometimes the most expensive specialists miss what careful attention finds. Be the person who pays attention. Share this video, because somewhere out there, another Alice is still waiting to be noticed.